Good morning. Today is Wednesday, December 25th, 2025. Tonight we begin the holiday of Chanukah, a holiday of miracles. There are different types of miracles. In Chanukah itself, there are different types of miracles. So today, in preparation for Chanukah, I want to share one type of miracle, a specific type of miracle. And I want to share it in two stories. I heard this story a number of years ago from Rabbi Zalman Vishevsky. So it's a story about a miracle, but it's not the kind of miracle that we often think about. But again, my purpose is that we should widen our perspective into what we consider to be miracles. So this happened a number of years ago in Los Angeles. In the middle of the night, in Los Angeles, in California, there was an earthquake. And it was a significant earthquake. Very few people got hurt, but lots of buildings were destroyed, and lots of places were, there was rubble, and it was clear that there was something significant that happened. And the area of the earthquake included the Chabad synagogue, which is on Pico Boulevard in Los Angeles. If you know Los Angeles, Pico Robertson, it's one of the main Jewish areas. There's a Chabad shul there. And like every other building in the area, the building shook from top to bottom, and the chairs flew, and the books fell down, and everything was turned upside down, like everywhere else. But at that moment, in the middle of the night, there was one single young man who was there. And he was sitting by himself. And he was studying Torah in this synagogue. And he saw what happened. Again, he was all by himself. He saw what happened. And he decided that he would return everything to its proper place. And so he worked all night long, returning the books to the shelves, cleaning and sweeping, putting the chairs back in order. And when the morning came, and people arrived for the morning minyan, no one could tell that an earthquake had occurred in this synagogue, because it was all cleaned up. And when the morning minyan came, and they were so shocked because they knew that all the buildings around were damaged, and the Chabad synagogue, not a touch, nothing out of order. And they said to themselves, wow, this is a miracle. Of all the buildings in the area, they were all destroyed, except for the Chabad shul on Pico. It's a miracle. Now, the young man who had been there all night cleaning up heard everyone talking about the great miracle, and at first he felt that he should tell them that it really wasn't a miracle, because he was there all night, and he cleaned it up. So yes, the Chabad shul was affected by the earthquake just like everybody else, but there was someone there and he put it back in order. But then he stopped himself, and he understood that these people who had come to the morning minyan, they did encounter a miracle. And the miracle was me. And I think that there is a profound lesson in this story. And that is, we need to widen our conception of what a miracle is. We can be the miracle in someone else's life. Now, it can happen behind the scenes with nobody else knowing. But when we take responsibility for something and we take action in the world, and it can be in any area of life, the person that we benefit can very well believe that they received a miracle. And it is very possible that we can be the miracle in someone else's life. This is a somewhat similar story. I have shared this before, but due to recent current events, I feel compelled to share it again. So at the beginning of our Torah portion of Mikeitz, Yosef is 17 years old. His brothers had gone away with the flocks, and Yaakov says to Yosef, go visit your brothers and see how they're doing. And he tells them where they are. So Yosef says, okay. Yosef goes to the place where Yaakov told them they would be, and he does not find them. Vayimtzo'ehu ish. He found a man. This man is not identified. Vayishaelu. Ha'ish lemor matavakesh. The man asked him, what are you looking for? And he said, Esachai anochi mevakesh. Tell me where they went. Vayomer ha'ish. And the man said, Nas'u mizeh. They were here, but they left here because they said, excuse me. I apologize. Excuse me. Because they said, we're going to go to Dosan. The pasturing was better, or whatever the reason, they were here, but you'll find them in a place called Dosan. So Yosef listened to him, and he went to this place, and he found his brothers in Dosan, and then everything else that happens as a result happens. But everything that happens really happens as a result of that man, unnamed. Because without that man, Yosef wouldn't have found his brothers. Presumably, he would have just gone back home and said to his father, I don't know where they are. And none of the rest of the story would have happened. But he found them. And all of the rest of the story of this week's parsha, next week's, and the legacy that continues happens because of this man. Who was this man? Rashi says, this man was not a man, he was a malach. He was an angel. He was the angel Gavriel. Gavriel. Okay. So it was a malach. So this was all part of Hashem's plan. We don't understand why it had to happen like this. It certainly caused a lot of difficulty and problems and upset and trauma. But it was a malach. Okay. We understand Hashem says malachim. Hashem sends malachim, angels, to do his will. The Ramban says something different. The Ramban says that this man was a man. He was a man. Nothing special about him. And he just happened to be a man who just happened to be in this place, who just happened to overhear these brothers saying, we're going to go to Dosan. And so when Yosef says to him, where did my brothers go? He says, I heard them say they're going to Dosan. Now this man has no idea that his input is actually going to put into play some gigantic narrative that will go on for centuries and have a legacy that will last for millennia and change the course of Jewish history. This man has no idea of what he is setting into place. He was going about his own business. But going about his own business, he was unwittingly going about God's business. And the Ramban says that is also called a miracle. Now the Ramban, of course, discusses at great length the flashier mitzvos, right? the splitting of the Red Sea, the candle, the oil for one night lasted 8 nights. Okay, there are different kinds of miracles. But the Ramban says there's such a thing as a natural miracle. In other words, events that seem to follow the ordinary course of things, and the person or persons involved have no idea that they are actually performing roles for God, effecting miracles, and they don't even know about it. And therefore, we have to be open to when a malach appears in our life, or to the message that he or she brings us. And even if it is a regular person, to be open to the fact that what we are now hearing, what we are now encountering, could actually be the beginning of some kind of miracle. We may not understand it. We may not understand it until much later. We may not understand it forever. But we need to be open to the fact that there are these kinds of miracles. And by the way, and what that also means is, when you give a stranger instructions, you may be doing an unwitting miracle of your own. So this is a story that Rabbi Riskin tells. I've told it before, but it's relevant to current events. There was an Israeli pilot that told this story about 3 years after the Six-Day War. This is 1967, so 3 years later, 1970. So this Israeli pilot who had fought in the Six-Day War, you remember, that war was also against Syria, and Israel conquered the Golan Heights at that time. So this pilot tells the story that during that time of the Six-Day War, the Syrians began dangerous provocations towards Israel. And Israel had to be very, very careful about what could happen from the direction of Syria. So, the commander had ordered a plane to fly at supersonic speed, extremely low, over the main business section of Aleppo, the famous city of Aleppo, which at that time still had a significant Jewish community, in order to send a message, because if you have a supersonic plane that's flying very low, it's frightening. It makes a big, big boom. It's frightening. And it was a warning to the Syrian government and to the population, don't mess around with us. So, this pilot got this mission, he carried out his mission, and the provocation stopped. Okay, that's the end of the story. But it's not exactly the end of the story. 10 years later, so this is now 1980, this same pilot, no longer part of the army, was driving from Haifa to Tel Aviv. And he stopped to pick up a hitchhiker who was wearing an IDF uniform. So there's a younger man in an IDF uniform, and he picked him up to give him a ride from Haifa to Tel Aviv. They started to talk, and the former soldier discovers that his passenger, who's now an IDF soldier, this young man, this passenger was a Syrian Jew whose family made aliyah by walking all the way from Aleppo about 10 years before. Okay, so the older soldier doesn't reveal anything, but of course he knows what actually happened 10 years ago. So listen to this. So this young IDF soldier tells the following story. He said, I was just a young boy, I was just bar mitzvah. And one night, an Israeli plane flew over the business section of Aleppo right near our house. And the supersonic boom was deafening. It scared us all. And moreover, the glass of the stores along the main street all crashed to the floor because it was a gigantic noise, supersonic plane flying very, very low. But what was amazing was that it shattered all the glass of the stores, except not the Jewish stores. None of the Jewish stores had their glass broken. Seemed like a miracle. And as a result, his father, remember the boy is 13 years old, his father decided this is a message from God, that it is time to leave Syria and to come to our homeland, to come to Eretz Yisrael. And the family walked from Aleppo across Syria and came into Israel and made Aliyah. 10 years later, this young boy is now in the IDF. And the truth is, he says, it wasn't just our family. There were many families, Jewish families that lived in Aleppo that were so amazed by this miracle that they traveled together to make Aliyah and moved to Israel 10 years ago. Now, so this pilot, the retired pilot who had done this mission, he had been an angel, right? He had done something unwittingly. He was following an order having to do with military strategy, but unwittingly, he was performing a miracle of getting all of these Jewish families to leave Syria and to make Aliyah. And we know, of course, how important that was for families to get out of Syria, Jewish families especially, to get out of Syria and to get into Israel. Thank God they made it at that time. Who knows what would have happened to them if they would have stayed, God forbid. So this pilot was an angel. He had done a miracle. Unwittingly, he had caused all these people to leave a dangerous place and make Aliyah. Notwithstanding the fact that the pilot understood that there was a perfectly logical reason for what this boy reported. And the logical reason is as follows. The Syrians, at that time in Aleppo, had main streets where there were businesses, and they had side streets. The Syrian government at that time did not allow any Jewish stores on the main streets. Jewish stores on the side streets. You're not good enough for the main streets. Well, since the pilot flew parallel to the main street, remember, he was trying to frighten the citizens of Aleppo and the government, so he flew down the main street. So therefore, all the glass in the shops along the main street, which all were owned by non-Jews, the glass was shattered. But the glass that was on the side streets, that's where the Jewish stores were, that glass was untouched. So there was a logical reason why none of the Jewish stores were harmed. But that doesn't take away from the fact that it was a miracle. An unwitting miracle, but a miracle nonetheless. Different kinds of miracles. We can receive miracles in all sorts of ways. We can do miracles in all sorts of ways. And starting tonight, the holiday of Chanukah, with its multiple miracles, in many different ways, should encourage us to think in these terms, that perhaps what we are doing is a miracle for someone else. And perhaps what someone else is doing for us is also a miracle. My friends, I wish you a great day and a very joyous Hanukkah. And I look forward to seeing you soon in person.